Hey everybody, welcome back to the Collective. We have another awesome show. Yuri's having trouble getting in right now, but we'll sort this out in a minute. Um, biggest question, first off, Randy, thanks for joining us. This is going
My
to be an
pleasure. Thanks for having me, fellas.
awesome
Yeah, man,
chat.
it's
I'm looking
awesome.
forward to this, and I've had this in my head for a little while, and I was like, "Ooh, it's going to be awesome."
Dude, he's
Uh,
the worst.
so, the question I have is, first off, is anybody got any thoughts, anything, questions, anything burning in your mind that you want to get out to the world before we just like dive into the conversation?
No, I'm just looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I honestly have no idea what you guys have in store for questions, so this is going to be authentic. And yeah, let us rip. Can you hear? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Does anything audio need to be adjusted?
No,
Oh,
it sounds
sounds
good.
good. You're all good, man. And, okay, Yuri's here too, so we'll carry on with the we'll jump him in and we'll get on the conversation anyway. Yuri, what's up? Able to make it?
Hello
Hey,
to
buddy.
everyone.
Good to go. Who do we got? And Winterstorm's joining us. Morning, Winterstorm.
More,
We
buddy.
got people already lining up to watch. So we're going to go into a little bit different than what we had planned originally, Yuri. We're going to talk a bit more about the evolution of combatives. And I think this is a great topic because actually Randy and I were just talking about this in the green room before y'all showed up, because I was giggling a little bit that Randy showed up exactly 10 minutes early. like I watched my watch gives me a little notice at 10 minutes too. That I have like so many more steps I need to get in, right? And it buzzed on my wrist, and I looked up, and his little window popped up underneath me, and I was like, "Dang!" Like nailed the timing.
Winner.
So this is the first thing we were talking about, was that how jiu-jitsu has developed over the last 20, 30 years. But Shaun, you were bringing up the fact that the combative systems that we've been using within the military has changed since, like, over time as well. Do you want to dive into that right away, and we can see where that takes us?
Yeah, sure. I'll start it off real quick with kind of a overarching theme, if you will, and it would be just kind of from a live chat. I don't know, 2, 3, 4 days ago, whatever it is. And I forget his call sign on Instagram, xep06 or something like that. He's a young guy, and he asked me. There was a conversation about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ, and he said, "Yeah, but what about Japanese Jiu-Jitsu? What do I think about that?" And I said, I went straight over to my bookcase, grabbed a book, and it's Bruce Tegner's book that I on jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu, that I bought around 85. And from that point forward, that book was the only freaking book for like 1,000-kilometer radius that had anything to do with martial arts and the military. I mean, there was nothing. There was no books. No one was reading books. No one was doing it. So I carried that book around with me like a martial arts Bible, and it was that I started incorporating into the the Canadian Airborne Regiment's unarmed combat demonstration team. I was just reading pages and say, let's try this, let's try that, and so from there, the evolution of Japanese jiu-jitsu in my early military career, and then right through into JTF2, there was still no Brazilian jiu-jitsu when I left the teams. And so all of the stuff that I did from scrap in the military, it was judo based or Japanese jiu-jitsu based or Muay Thai based or standard issue karate kickboxing based and all of that good stuff. But I never got to do any MMA when I was in the military. But subsequently, or after I left, Randy and his generation brought in that modern mixed martial arts game, a much more comprehensive, effective, and adaptive style of combatives in the military that I missed, that I had to go find out on civilian street. But I missed a huge chunk of wisdom and technical prowess. I never got to see any of that within the military, but I do understand it exists now because, of course, I've been lurking in Randy's Instagram account for some time, seeing that, you know, he's 10 times the martial artist that I am. So it's great to see that the military can create an extremely technical and competent, capable martial artist through that military system. Oh, that's my opening comment.
Dang. See, I say this every time that Shaun needs to not have a boom so that he can drop mics, because he does that a lot.
Yeah, but does anyone disagree? I mean,
No, absolutely.
anyone disagree?
Randy, what are your thoughts on the? I mean, you were in for quite some time at the Hill, so like, did you see a progression?
Oh yeah, big
of
time.
like how that worked?
Yeah, big time. So when I started my military career with the PPCLI, jiu-jitsu really wasn't a thing. There would be some forms of grappling, but I agree with Shaun. It was more judo based. There was a flavor of judo towards it, which was great. I mean, there's absolutely any type of grappling and clinch work is good. But what I noticed was, after 5 or 6 years, or well, 5 years with the PPCLI, and then when I did selection and I went to JTF2, the gentleman that was running the program at the unit at the time, his name was Casper, and he came from a lineage of Muay Thai. And I would say that the combative program that was implemented at that time had a strong base of Muay Thai kickboxing. There was definitely some grappling in there as well. I know at that time Casper had a really good relationship with Eric Paulson in California, so he adopted some of the combat submission wrestling stuff and implemented that into the program, and it was strong. It was a pretty strong program for someone that maybe has never done any formal training. And then to get embedded with, I think it ended up being close to 30 hours of concentrated training where, they took us from, this is a basic 1-2 combination. This is how you throw a punch without falling off balance. And then, this is what a clinch looks like. This is what happens when you end up in a 50-50 position. And then it would go to the ground. And we talk about all the pros and cons of escaping, precarious positions to submitting and finishing guys. So I did see an evolution in my time while I was there. And then I was pretty fortunate after spending probably 10 years operational as an assaulter at the unit. I then transitioned into the training cell where I was, afforded the opportunity to progress the program even more. And what we started to implement was not just grappling in the sense of holistic grappling, whether it's Japanese jiu-jitsu forms or judo forms, but it was more so traditional jiu-jitsu. So you start to see a little bit more of what you would see in a traditional jiu-jitsu setting. We saw ways to make that tactically feasible and understandable for those who are trying to apply it in a tactical world. So yeah, I definitely watched the progression and evolution of combatives grow to where I think is in a it's in a healthy position. There's always room to evolve. There's always areas to improve, but generally speaking, for somebody that maybe has never done any formal training and then they get to where they are now, I'm just going to use JTF2 as an example because that's where I spent the majority of my career. Those guys are in a good position to really defend themselves and help out their teammates.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. So one thing that I really missed getting when I was in was there was really no hand-to-hand combat unless you were taking the CQC course, right? And even then, that was really only relegated to the infantry. You had to finagle your way in to get that if you weren't in the infantry when I was there. And so I always believe that it should be a military wide. We should have some level of combatives or some sort of development in there outside my own. Yuri, did you see any direct combatives training when you were going through?
Well, I have some thoughts, and my military career tilts about 1 year, so I definitely don't see some changes.
Yeah.
But about what you would say, first of all, about judo and jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I think they're more talking about some stylistic business deals. Because if we gather together, if you to see in judo, we see some changes for more attractive as a sport, as looking sport for Olympic Games. But for example, we can see the Koshin judo, if you know, this part of judo community in Japanese who provide more grappling in parser, more not even I would say realistic, but they make more free to grapple, taking more time for grappling as a partner.
Mm.
And what about the changes for military? First of all, I think it's because we have some type of war which provides into the cities with a lot of civilian, and even just infantry soldiers have situation where he is talked with civilian, with aggressive civilian, and he might to have some tools to protect their lives, their weapon against unarmed attacking. So they must to learn some grappling techniques. And again, if you see the combatives till the 16th centuries, we will see the same thing, the same throws, the same takedowns, the same locks, the same defenses against the knife or stick, or because we don't change like human beings. We have one head, two hands, and two legs. So there are no much ways to deal with aggressive opponent.
Yeah. There's only so many ways you can hold a stick or a knife or a sword, or so it makes sense. There's only so many ways.
Do you know what changes that ebb and flow? So, let's pretend all the martial arts that anyone ever needed to know had been invented by the year 1000.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, that's ridiculous as an idea, but as a thought experiment, let's say it's all been invented by the year 1000. Why does, why in the 1980s, the early 1980s, was there an ineffective combatives program? And here's what I think: because the institution had become incestuous. And so it was predominantly infantry guys that were interested in kicking ass. I mean, I'm not gonna, I don't want to use too broad of a brush, but it's us that are mostly kicking the ass. And so when I was in the PPCLI, the combatives never really happened. The first time I kind of got introduced to combatives for serious was on my unarmed combat instructors course that was run at the Airborne Regiment with 1, 2, and 3 Commando. It was hard, man. I was scrapping every day with the biggest guy in the course, and I was a short ass, and it was hard, but it was all old school. And it was just a bunch of Army guys, good Army guys, teaching other good Army guys stuff. And so the first time that changed was when I was teaching an unarmed combat instructor's course out in 3 PPCLI in Victoria with myself and a fella, Sergeant Brad Gates, and the two of us running the program. And I got introduced to a civilian. His name is Al Cardi. And this guy was bringing a whole different game that I'd never seen before with collie or knife fighting and with just a bunch of different things. He was a door bouncer for many, many years. And so he was showing me ways to control the human body in a grappling position that I knew base posture and structure from judo before I joined the Army, but I'd never felt what he was teaching me before. And so asked him to come and be a civilian instructor on our course. And I don't want to say he ran it, but he kind of did. He was kind of like a quiet civilian professional, and I'd look at him and he'd look at me, and then he'd say something quietly, and then we'd get on with it. It was my job to make it happen. It was his job to pass the wisdom. And so it was an extremely successful course. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a civilian in anything to do with the infantry, never mind combatives. And so the next time I saw a civilian involved was when I went out to JTF2. And I don't know if you would know him, Randy. I'll use his first name. It's Bob. And he was running the Muay Thai program at the time. That's right. So that was my first intro to Muay Thai. And from that moment on, I only stopped doing Muay Thai like about 5 years ago He introduced me to Muay Thai, and I did it for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I dig on stand-up, I dig on throwing, I dig on grappling. But what I've seen is combatives in the military only become more effective when civilians get involved to help shape the actual, not cutting edge, but the relevant edge required for the relevant times. If not for that, it becomes incestuous, and then it's old thinking teaching new minds old thoughts. Am I off base?
No, I agree. I think the lineage at the unit, for example, Bob was there. Casper took over from Bob. I took over from Casper, and now it's back to a civilian who's running the program. And I think there's pros and cons to having an outsider. Maybe it's not the right word, but somebody that's not
It's a pretty good word.
Somebody that's not in uniform. There's some pros and cons to that because they will look at the problem set a little bit differently. What I do think is important is that there's somebody there with a tactical mindset that can ensure that what is being taught has a relevance that is tactically driven. So, like for an example, the gentleman that's running the program now, he's a black belt in judo, he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, he's fought some MMA, he's done some what else has he done? He's got a list, a repertoire of skills, which is great because now the guys that are on the receiving end, they're getting a little taste of multiple different martial arts, and then it's up to them to figure out what way, or sorry, maybe not what way, but what particular technique that their body will allow them to execute under pressure, under stress, in a tactical situation. And that is the difference. I do believe there's a lot to take away from sports side of martial arts, but I also believe that there is a fine line that needs to be at least polished up every now and again in terms of what is the tactical relevance. And if there's a connection there, man, you've got, I would say, the 95% solution.
Yeah. I love that.
Good old 95% solution. It's almost perfect, but not quite.
And I do that on purpose because I do believe that there's no such thing as perfect.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you hear the term subject matter expert. I don't like it. I don't agree with it because what it suggests is you've made it to the top and there's nowhere else for you to go. I disagree with that. The learning always evolves and it always carries on. So like perfect doesn't exist. So we'll strive for excellence and we'll aim for what we believe to be perfect. But in all reality, I truly believe to the core of my being, like perfect doesn't exist. So let's try to limit the amount of use that we throw that word out there.
You're right.
Correct. Yeah.
You're right. And it's only just recently that I started using subject matter expert. And it's because a bunch of my Army buddies were using it so much that I just kind of picked it back up again from back in the day. It was never part of my lingo until just recently. So yeah, I'm going to have to try and drop it again. Thanks, Randy.
No using SMEs anymore. Nobody gets to be a SME. It's actually interesting. I had an instructor of mine tell me at one point in time that you can't clear a road 100%. There's absolutely no, unless I dig up the road, and even then, how deep you're going to dig, how far are you going to go, right? And then so you can always say, I did my best. Yeah. This is clear as far as I can tell. Like all my things are working. But you're right. You can never be 100%. I was going to ask you guys about defensive tactics, and then Randy went into it right away. He just jumped right into it. What was Shaun, did you get any sort of like defensive tactics style stuff where you were armed against disarmed versus the stuff that Randy you were teaching before you got out? Shaun, did you see any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, before I got to the Hill, it's what I was teaching on my unarmed combat instructor's course. Again, straight up out of that Bruce Tegner Japanese Jiu-Jitsu book. There's a lot of great. Historically, there's a lot of amazing martial art out there that is specifically about weapons disarms or weapons controlling or involved with weapons, and it's not overly complex stuff. And I've been able to teach pretty effective things to young infantrymen in the space of an hour that they can use for the rest of their lives and will save their life. And so, yeah, before the teams, definitely. And when on the teams, definitely. But I would also like to add that not as nuanced, not as effective, not as broad bandwidth sort of minded as what Randy would have been doing in his time and what they're doing now.
What do you think the biggest difference, Randy, from when you first showed up to when you left?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think the biggest difference is mindset. So when, like some of the stuff that I share with folks now, predominantly with military and law enforcement, is I'll break down the nomenclature. To me, and this is just my perspective and my philosophy. Defensive tactics is what's commonly referred in law enforcement. And the way I look at it is, oftentimes when a situation will present itself, the officer is really in a defensive posture. He's trying to de-escalate the situation with words or body language. And really, the adversary, the aggressor, is at an advantage because they have a say in the situation, where the defensive side of things, defensive tactics, puts us at a defensive posture, and we're already thinking about ways that we can potentially de-escalate or utilize a series of tools that might be on the tool belt. Martial arts, when I try to share with folks and again, this is just my philosophy, is it's a choreographed set of skills that are agreed upon two individuals that are, they're training in a controlled environment. There is a set of controlled rules at which both parties agree to and respect. And then the third of the three that I like to share, and what I consider the product and the brand of direct action, is combatives. So combatives, in my perspective, is utilizing anything that is readily accessible at the extension of the hand to help neutralize a situation. And that doesn't necessarily mean eliminate somebody and put them 6 feet under, but make the situation go away. When we decide to make that leap, we're doing it fast, aggressive, and get to the point. So defensive tactics, more defensive posture, start state. Martial arts, more agreed upon series set of rules that is in a controlled environment. And then a combative mindset is, listen, I don't want the situation to go physical, but if it does, I've got a series of solutions to this potential problem.
Yeah. It's like being first, right? My professor says this all the time. It's like, if you're going to go to a tournament, be first.
Yes.
Don't let up on the initiative. You have to be first. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sean, you got a point?
Yeah, just on the nomenclature, thanks for cleaning that up. And I agree on that nomenclature as observed for the year that I taught at the Ontario Police College as a defensive tactics instructor. And so you're right. It's all about context. It's all about environment. It's all about what your job is at that moment. It's all about how to do it easily, safely, effectively, and get on with your life.
Yeah.
The big question I wanted to ask you guys, Yuri, you had something?
Yep, of course. As an instructor in police academy, I want to say that for police guys, we have two totally different situations. One of them when he used his hand-to-hand combative on when they use force, generally speaking, force to making his professional things, to arrested someone, to grab someone to go to the jail or something else. And another big situation when this policeman defending against attack. And we have two different mindsets in this situation. We might have two different technique or even style, because when you won't just arrested man, you have some limits about law, about moral. You can't hit this person. You can do a lot of stuff for them. And when you defending against attacking, you have more wide techniques and more dangerous techniques. So when we teaching when I teaching guys, the first thing was about the looking at situation, about color code, about Boyd loop, and other things that he he need to know in what situation they are.
Mm.
Did he need pull the CS ballon, or they already need to pull the pistol? Do they need some grapple, or they must throw everything and run away to the cover and begin to shoot him? I think there is a very tough tough choice for every man. We see some mistakes, especially in these things. We all know about the case who started BLM, where for thinking of judges, there are no possibilities to do so tough locking technique, but maybe for officers at the place, what they decided in seconds, judges and in jail was take for years. For years, people began to speaking about, do they do the right thing or wrong thing, but decision of these policemen consist of a few moments.
Yeah. That split second armchair quarterbacks, right? Armchair
Hey,
quarterbacks
Randy.
versus the split second.
Yeah.
On that note, quick question: did you have a formal model, use of force continuum model, that was either specific to the hill or specific to whatever? Did you have a formal application?
No, we didn't have a formal diagram or drawdown on active resistance, passive resistance, verbal de-escalation. Not a formal setting, but essentially what we would share with the guys as a foundational baseline is, whether we're alone or in a team fighting context, there's always more than one option. Always.
Right.
The problem is, and I agree with Yuri's point, when we have to make a split second decision, knowing that there is going to be critics whether we make a great decision, there's going to be critics if we make a poor decision. Where I believe we should put a little bit more heat and light is helping the individual understand how to build confidence in utilizing whatever tool or skill that they have in their repertoire. Under stress, under duress, can they execute that particular movement? So for an example, I'll use a law enforcement officer for an example. He or she has multiple less than lethal force options on their tool belt, which means they have multiple decisions to make on multiple uses in the exact same situation. That can be overwhelming for somebody that doesn't have a lot of confidence in their ability to execute based on the information that they have readily accessible. So how do we bridge that gap? I'm a firm believer that we bridge the gap through realistic, not situations that are given to the officer, but realistic scenarios that put pressure on the officer to make a decision. And then regardless, during training, what decision is made, there is a teachable moment that needs to be rectified on that spot, like on the spot, in the moment. And if it's a decision that is made that's, less desirable, okay, no problem. Let's reset it. Give this officer a couple of options, a couple of takeaway points to adjust their thought process, and then run the scenario again. And then through those types of repetition, where the officer or the soldier, actually, it's good for a military context too, where the soldier doesn't always come out as the winner. Like sometimes you're going to make a poor decision, but that's okay. During training, we want to make those poor decisions. That way, when it's on the day, there's less of a chance we're going to make a poor decision because we've got that out of the way during training. So it all comes back to, and I truly believe this, I believe training for the sake of training is problematic. But if it's very purposeful and it's specific, with a specific desire and a specific intent to be met in that training aid, you're giving the officer or the soldier a lot more tools, but more importantly, you're arming them with the ability to make a wise decision under pressure.
I agree with all of that. 103%. But as I see it, where that kind of falls apart, that model is if the model is created in not a cookie cutter way, but let's say it's a model of excellence as you just described it. And in that model, it then gets printed off on a one-page sheet and then gets handed out to some organization. Now you've got various individuals across the country. They're trying to implement this kind of model that could be extremely successful. But as I've learned over the years, that success is not determined by the model. It's determined by the guy who's running the model on that local site. And so that individual needs to be, of course, talented and et cetera. But one of the highest priority skills he or she has to have is this: they've got to be able to communicate well with an individual through the after action report, because there will have been mistakes made and there will be lessons that need to be learned and there will have to be corrections. But whoever's doing that 1, 2, 3 minute debrief, that really sets the tone for the success of the model. Would you disagree or agree with that?
I agree, and I would just add to it a little bit. I would say that model is subjective, because what somebody, who sees a subject demonstrating active resistance, for example, one person may view that like that's the most stressful thing that they've ever experienced in their life, where somebody else maybe grew up, they were in tussles all the time. So to them, getting punched in the face or throwing a punch is not really a big deal. So their level of acceptance in terms of what is subjected to active resistance or passive resistance may be very, very different. So I would agree, yes, that the instructor delivering the material, there's a high level of social and emotional intelligence that's important to become a really good instructor, in my opinion. But also, we also, as an instructor, we have to take the time to get to know the audience to which we're dealing with, because what one person may feel very, very stressful, somebody else may feel like it's a walk on the beach, and vice versa. So getting to know what a person's background was, and what kind of experiences they lived through up to this point, that's really important as well.
Well, can I hit you with an academic question? Just not a challenging question, but it's just purely academic.
Sure.
So looking at that, and I agree again, if you consider that, now we're talking about how best to deliver information to a broader bandwidth of demographic that's standing in front of you. And as an instructor or delivering the information, you have to be sensitive to doing that well. So do you think for efficiency and effectiveness, you would, if you could only choose one, would you prefer a siloized organization where it's a tighter bandwidth so that you're not having to deal with the broad bandwidth in front of you? But now you're jumping from silo to silo to silo, maybe 100 times a month, versus a broad bandwidth where you're only jumping maybe 3 or 4 times a month, but the delivery is a little more complex and nuanced. What do you think?
Maybe, if you don't mind, maybe if you could elaborate just a little bit on when you refer to silos. If we have a training body of, say, 20 people, and on Monday we're going to focus on stand-up, and on
right, no, sorry. What I meant was, let's say you've got the opportunity to train 100 independent little groups, and it's
Right.
not a particular martial art. It's just you get those 5 guys for a day.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would say we would probably get, as somebody that's been on the receiving end of really good instruction and somebody that's been on the receiving end of poor instruction, I believe that when the numbers are smaller, the quality in the delivery, more importantly, the retainability is exponentially higher. So smaller group, higher the quality. That way, the instructor or instructors have a smaller number of people that they can help correct and troubleshoot when there's issues, as opposed to having a large body where we'll say arguably maybe 50%, if we're lucky, is actually retained. And of that 50%, did the instructor even get a chance to help with, 1 or 2 of those people based on the number size? So yeah, I would say keep it smaller if possible.
Well, that's been my observation as well. So now the final follow-on would be this. If you had your way, how would you deliver to, let's just say, the entire infantry?
Sure.
So no other trade, just the infantry. How would you approach that challenge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I would approach it by first formulating a stable of instructors that are all speaking the same language. and then we would break it down into, because in the infantry they operate in platoon size and they operate in section size. So I would break it down into section size. So if it's a day per section of dedicated concentrated training, that's the way I would break it down.
I like it. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yuri?
Yep, thanks. Well, from what point we started Combatives? When I read about William Everett Fairbairn, who really maybe not founding, but involve such even word as combatives, as point shooting, as shooting houses, and many things. The really great man for tactical science. We will see that he tended to train even not little group, but one man. And some guys from SOE, from British Commando, from Green Berets, they remembering that in hard situation, they remembering when these guys go to the shooting house, Fairbairn go to his back and saying with quiet and voice, do that or do that, look at this. And this guy says his students that in real situations they remember this voice. They remember what he say, and they helping him to stay focused on these things. And another thing, I really don't see the real high level students in traditional martial arts, in karate, in aikido. I don't take a lot of training like that, but who train big parts of students, big numerous of students. It's from heart to heart. If you want to teach another master, you must have some time for personal trainings, because it's a brilliant of your collection of your students. But for most of these guys, maybe groups about 10, 15 guys, it's the most. Yeah. Fortunately for now, we have I have groups about 45, 50 guys. So the quality is not even well.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do with 40 or 50 people in one room. I don't remember where I heard this, but it was something about you can only really communicate with 3 to 4 people in your immediate vicinity. Outside of that, you start to lose control. You can't really control those 3 or 4 people outside of.
I've only got a couple of friends, so I don't have any concerns at this
point. There you go. But I remember hearing that, and that's why we have our sections divided the way we do, and that's why we have is because your 2IC only controls 3 people, right? And the sergeant only controls 3 people, right? You got the master corporal and 2 corporals, and then the warrant only controls blah 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 blah, and everybody just kind of spreads downwards from there.
Yeah.
So now we have their tactical joke. Why standard patrol in SAS and another special forces contain 4 people, and in French Legion only 3 people. Because in Western we have 2 pairs for dealing, and in French Legion you have 1 legionnaire and 2 local, would say, monkeys, and a legionnaire in charge. And one guy from Legion say, you're right, because we now have 7 in squad, 7 guys, 1 corporal and 2 third man team.
Yeah.
So from 3 to 4 guys, it's okay. That's why we need corporals, we need surgeons, staff surgeons, and all this
all the way up.
Cool guys.
Yeah. I got a comment here from Winterstorm. It's a little bit long, so bear with me here.
All right.
We got some good. It's a really good thought. The failings in our law enforcement community is individuals who only train defensive tactics, which rely heavily on tools, which we are often not proficient in, with no transition to combat tactics. The transition never happens and people get hurt when they shouldn't. From effective defensive tactics to combative tactics, but importantly, back to defensive with minimal harm to everyone. The way I'm reading that, it's more along the lines of like being able to switch back and forth, right? And I think that's what he's saying is we're lacking, or the law enforcement community might be lacking, is being able to go from defensive to offensive, back to defensive to mid-range, and so on and so forth. Any thoughts on that, Randy?
Yeah, that's the way I understand that too, as I was reading it with you, Chance. And I think he's on to something, and I do believe one thing that I like to pride myself on, and when I'm teaching and sharing this stuff, is I like to call it a dial rather than a switch. So when we crank the dial up, it's because we need to get the initiative or regain the initiative or take the initiative. So we dial it up. But we also have to have the emotional control to be able to dial it back when we do start to feel like we're getting in control or regaining that control. And I think that's a challenging thing to do. And I also believe not everybody has it. Some people have a switch, and that's just the way they work. Once the switch is flipped, they're on full send. But I do believe with training and highlighting some things about social and emotional intelligence, being able to dial that when it's responsible, the responsibility is on us. Sorry, that's the difference between a professional and somebody that's just not quite there yet. They can get there, but they're just not there yet.
Shaun, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree, and that's how I read the question as well. And I think it comes down to, as I read it, possibly the challenge of just simply not enough scenario-based training. And, in order, as Randy has already said, and I completely agree, it can't just be scenario training that is got simple solutions with simple outcomes. It needs to be pressure tested. And I experienced this down at the Ontario Police College when a visiting unit came in, and they were the crowd control or the riot control squad. A lot of big boys in that, and some average size boys. But I'm all of 5'9" and 160 pounds kind of thing. And I didn't look like much. I looked a little bigger when I was in a full fist suit because they're going to come at me. And, the first few waves, they thought it was going to be like knock the small guy down. Negative. And so they just kept stacking more and more people against me and bigger guys until I was facing the big boys, and a number of them, they put a beating on me. But what they weren't prepared for was the level of, call it aggression, call it that ain't going to play out the way you think. But they just never, they'd probably seen it before, but they'd never seen it in scenarios before. I can guarantee you that, because they were all bug-eyed every time I returned their favor. And so I think it comes down to scenario-based training that makes people open their eyes and think, oh, there's levels to the game, or, oh, this isn't just a yawner for the day. They've got to wake up, feel the pressure, and then learn from it.
Yeah, we were about this a second ago, or not a second ago, a couple days ago. I was telling you about, I was watching a video of the bags coming off the head, and you're just presented with a situation. Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, so that's one way. Those are referred to as hooded box drills. So those are what I call micro ballistic fights, because they're short in duration. They're really quick and efficient to reset, so you can get a lot of guys through a lot of repetitions. So those are definitely beneficial for sure. It allows the officer or the soldier to take in, as soon as that hood comes off, take in as much information as they can. And they're literally going through the file folder of options that they have. And then they're hoping that they pull out the right file folder to create a solution to that problem. Those training sessions are money. Those are really, really powerful. In addition to Shaun's point, with scenario training, I think that where you get the juice for the squeeze, so to speak, is not just putting scenarios together that are chaotic and it's designed to fail. That's not the point. Incrementally, when we add pressure, incrementally when we add scenarios of complexity, incrementally what happens to the student is they are learning and adapting to chaotic situations that are happening every repetition is a little bit different. So now they have information in their file folder as a reference point should it ever happen for real later on down the road. And I believe that there's a way to do that where people are not going to get hurt and messed up, but they are going to be put in positions of discomfort. And I believe that's where the true growth happens, is when you're on that edge of discomfort.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I see this drill in TV show Navy SEAL or Team 6. I don't remember. There's some thing on the head. And so what I wanna ask you guys, how it's in your places. How much time? First of all, how much time the students take part in some combative situation? First of all, second one, do you have any choice when some students came to police academy? Do you have power say no with mental, most of all in mental some perspective? You can't do the job with some force because you can't do that. And what about exams at the end of your course?
I can start off because I preceded Randy in sort of this evolutionary process, and I'd say this, that when I went to the Hill, or when I went to JTF2, we trained a lot, and you know, in the selection process, into the later phases of the entire selection process, we trained a lot, and then when we're on the teams, we trained a lot. They probably train more now, I would suspect, but we were training a lot back then. And then in respect to testing, you were being tested like in the real time. Everyone knew what was up. All the eyes were on you. Your own eyes were on you. You knew when you were either faking it or you were making it. And so there was no real formal testing. Every day was a test. And then when I went into the civilian sector, or as a veteran, speaking specifically for the Ontario Police College, when in that process, there is a formal process, like I'd start off in front of the podium with 300 students in front of me, deliver that speech, do that thing, break up the groups, then go look after my group, and I'd have a body of day one students in front of me, moving them through that process. That process is a way different process than the military process, and it's a way different process than the units process at JTF2 level. And so every challenge has its own challenges, and so I don't think it's not a simple solution of this, that, and then finally that. Every solution has a unique process, in my opinion. I don't know if I answered your question, though, Yuri.
Randy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, time is always an issue. Oftentimes you'll hear there's not enough time for this, that, and the other thing. So it's important as a team leader or somebody that's providing some legitimate information in terms of what is the highest priority right now based on the operational realities. What are we preparing for? What are the most common or the most probable courses that we may face? And then let's focus on that. It takes a lot of humility, I would say, is a big one, and checking the ego to, train wisely and be honest. Because I know from experience, I've watched guys, they will not train in anything that will expose a weakness or limitation. They will avoid that at all costs. They would much sooner rather train something that they're already really good at. And I like to share the philosophy of 70-30. So if we only have an hour, it's probably wise that we spend 70% of that hour working on the things that we're really not that good at yet. Maybe we're lacking a little bit of confidence in. And then 30% of the time, yes, let's continue to do the things that we're really good at, the things that we enjoy to do, because under stress and under duress, guess what's going to come to the surface first? It's going to be the things that you're good at. It's not going to be the things that you're not good at. So I do believe there's some humility and some egos that need to be checked and be honest with ourselves when we're training, because I agree with your point, Yuri. The time, the amount of time adequate or allocated rather for training tends to be the first thing that gets cut away.
Here's a question.
Could I continue
yeah,
about it?
Absolutely.
And for this information, what we're gonna do for these guys? Okay, you know what I've seen? Guys who very good train already getting to the military or to the police, they continue training. They continue training not only on duty but in his free time. They continue. They wanted to be as good soldiers as or policemen as they can be. You know, and what I do at the last week of course, I did the simple way. I just grab a training knife and begin attacking the students. Begin attacking with good power and good force, and most of them can't defend it. It's obviously because I have more experience about this thing, and have privilege because I have knife and they haven't. And I do it not for some to say to give him information that they didn't good in this thing. No, it's about another. It's about he doesn't, he can't stay on his level even after passing some courses, even after they gave to coming to the life. And I'll see to three of you guys, and I see that you really in real life after the duty you continue to practice to be the more dangerous warriors, and you spend all your life with this thing.
Yeah, because that's what I was taught to do. That's what I was taught to do. I was taught to be a professional, and once I was taught it, I couldn't forget it. So that's how I've always run my life ever since. And so, to Randy's point now, you're right. It is a freaking slap upside the head to choke down that ego and get real humilitized by the week that you turn 52, tie on a white belt in BJJ. And that was 7.5 years ago, baby. And I got my ass whooped so bad because I thought I could kick ass. And I'd been kicking ass for 33 years up until that point. But then I tied on that white belt and got my ass kicked. But it was good. I loved it. But that's the deal. I mean, first of all, you've got to be taught how to be a professional. And then you've got to remain professional. And then as you continue on that process of the journey of being an eternal professional, you've got to have the humility to absorb that suck. The suck of I do suck. And I'm facing it straight in the mirror. And so anyone out there who thinks they've got their act together, go find a way to not have your act together. It's imperative.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, is anyone who thinks that it's too late, exit that from the mindset. It's never too late to start something new. It's never too late to challenge the brain and the body. And it's never too late to harden up. Like every one of us can get a little bit harder, a little bit tougher to be that warrior. If we ever need to use these skills for real, we have it and it's readily accessible.
One of the best lines.
At the end, maybe I wanted to say some, as always, funny story. Sorry for my pure English, but I try to describe. So once we have artillery strike from Russians, Uragan. It's system like Grad, BM. Yes, it's
missile launcher, rocket launcher.
Yeah. And with me was two guys from my team. They guys not have no any military experience, and after the striking, we run away very quickly. They steal all his backpacks, his rucksacks on place, which hidden by missiles. We run away, sitting into the some forest, and first, his question after they understanding that dangerous goes away, they ask it, where we can buy first medic aid like you. And now they haven't. So for me, I think as instructors, we might to create some defensive shield which can which can stay in life our students after first dealing with real dangerous on the street or on a battlefield.
Yeah.
Because when they saw the first example of someone was dying or hurting in real life situation, they understand it why it's so important. But
Things got
fortunately,
real.
Yeah, things got
yeah,
real.
but fortunately, in real life, I think why we haven't so much time for combatives or hand-to-hand practice in police academy and in military, because dying of one soldier or policeman for police department or for country, it's just statistic. But for us and for his friends, for his family, it's a terrible.
Yeah.
So they counted. Okay, we spent, for example, 10 hours on hand to hand, 15 hours on shooting, and 104 hours for knowing the laws. Because in 99 percentage of our students, our police officers never say the real life situation with violence.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
You know, one of the interesting things that I've always, I can't really say I found it humorous, but it's always been kind of interesting to me is that until you've actually faced violence, real, straight up violence, you have no idea how you're going to react. And that is one of the best things that you get out of training is you get the reaction. And whether or not it's the correct reaction or, you know, you can armchair quarterback it later, but at least you have a reaction. Whereas if you don't have any training, you're well behind. We are almost an hour here, and first off, thanks guys. Thanks Urij, Randy, Shaun. Great conversation. This has been awesome. I love learning about the just the evolution of it all. It's fantastic.
Dude, I learned a bunch.
Right? Any final thoughts that we got? Anything burning in the back of your head you want to
yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Chance. I'll just I'll finalize just by saying thanks to the gentlemen on this panel. I appreciate having these chats for sure. Definitely opens up and definitely thought provoking for sure. And I guess the last thing I would say as I kind of sign off and say thank you is to echo your point, Chance. Any training is better than no training at all. So if life gets in the way, right? There's family frictions, there's work frictions for sure. We need to take training seriously and make that a priority. And if it's an hour a week, well, guess what? That's better than 0 hours a week. So every little bit counts. So if there's people out there wondering when to start or how to start, now is the time. I wouldn't waste another minute.
Yeah. There's a great old thing that I say all the time, and that is, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When's the second best time?
Right now.
Right now. Here we go. Urij, any final points? Anything you want to get across before we shut her down?
Well, as usual, it was a fantastic chat. Like to meet with Randy and have some information for my thoughts. And I think it must be not the last our meeting in this company. So thank you for all. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Our pleasure. Shaun, you got anything send it off with?
Yeah, just a little bit of a twist right here at the end, because I know we've been talking about a lot of sexy stuff. It's been magnificent. But I just want to kind of put a little bit more of not a Debbie Downer, but a little bit more realism on this to kind of wake people up a bit. I'd say this, that train, it's imperative, like your life depends on it. But don't train in your head, because I once had someone say to me, Shaun, you like fighting, don't you? And I said, I'm comfortable in a fight, but I don't like fighting. And they said, why? And I said, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been punched in the face really hard? And the answer is usually no. And then I am able to say to them, well, I've been punched in the face really hard, a lot. And I don't like it. Look at my nose. It's been broken 4 times. I'm lucky I got married. And so, plan in your head, of course, but realize that what we're talking about is not just defensive tactics or martial arts or combatives. It's kind of violence, man. And so if you've never experienced it, find a safe way to get introduced to the overarching theme of violence. And guys like Randy are the right people to be able to introduce you to those kind of themes.
Thank you.
And really, you don't want your first interaction with violence to be outside a bar or on the street or in a car, or like if you want your first interaction, it should be with someone like Randy or Urij or Shaun or me, someone on the mats in the proper positioning to be able to teach you correctly rather than teach you incorrectly.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, that's all we got. Randy, don't go anywhere yet though, because we usually we got to get some. We always talk in the green room afterwards. We got a good couple of minutes afterwards. So I really appreciate y'all for joining us. If you haven't, make sure that you subscribe and you do the whole notification thingy, the bell, and liking all that social media stuff. It's awesome if you do. Thanks very much, and yeah, hang out with us tomorrow as we continue to learn, build, and grow here on the Collective. We'll talk to y'all later. Chimo.